Why do madness and genius like to tango, as featured in Belonging Again? Shouldn't they share an inverse relationship? The hope of this work is also to connect the True Isn't the Rational trilogy with Belonging Again. It's cliché now, associating genius and madness. The market is saturated with movies and shows about it. The Queen's Gambit, Pi, Whiplash, I could go on. Why does this stereotype resonate? Well, because Nikola Tesla seems to have loved a pigeon and John Nash developed schizophrenia, the stereotype is backed by evidence. But isn't that strange? If genius is the ability to reason and madness the inability to reason, shouldn't they share an inverse relationship versus correlate? Well, as discussed through the True Isn't the Rational, the conflation of true and rational might be throwing us off, which I think could actually contribute to misdiagnosis and poor mental health treatment. If we don't understand that madness is found in unbound rationality, not the lack of rationality, then we'll think the solution is more rationality, when more rationality could make it worse. Also, by conflating rational and true, it doesn't even dawn on us that anything does or even could bind rationality, because we think that if something is rational, it stands by itself as true, autonomously. Moving forward, I will focus on John Nash and schizophrenia, though I believe the points I make about it can apply to mental illness in general, even if not to every case of mental illness. As found in A Beautiful Mind by Sylvia Nassar, Louis A. Sass describes schizophrenia as not an escape from reason, but an exacerbation of that thoroughgoing illness Dostoevsky imagined, at least in some of its forms, a heightening rather than dimming of conscious awareness, and alienation not from reason, but from emotion, instincts, and the will. I think this is critical and can help us solve the mystery. Deleuze is the great philosopher of schizophrenia who saw potential for approaching politics anew through a way of thinking that wasn't bound by any rigid structures, metaphors, and/or predictable associations. Please note that I personally have no trouble with stepping into a schizophrenic mindset for discovering new possibilities, inspiring creativity, and the like. But to allude to Belonging Again, the essay, I think if doing this requires us to destroy givens, then this is a mindset that we cannot step into without losing the capacity to go back, which could be dangerous. Why? Because then we'll end up like Tesla and Nash, brilliant and ruined. Yes, we might burn out gloriously, but will indeed burn out. Anyway, what we learn from Deleuze is that schizophrenia makes possible radical creativity. And if it's true that genius is more of a result of creativity than analytical ability, a key assumption here, though by no means do I mean analytical ability isn't needed at all, then genius must flirt with going too far to go anywhere worth going at all. It must try to reach beyond the givens of the day. But if the genius does this, the genius must flirt with the earth unchaining from the sun, to allude to Dostoevsky, to allude to Nietzsche, and/or a pitch and risk, as discussed in The Conflict of Mind, the essay. In other words, to break new grounds, geniuses must question the grounds on which they stand. Genius requires risk. But how can we assure this risk doesn't go too far? It's almost as if many great minds went through genius into madness. How can we get great minds to stop themselves early, like an inventor or gambler who needs to stop while they're ahead, like an investor or a gambler? And please note that, given habits, this is very hard to do. Well, being embedded in a common life helps, alluding to Hume, but also this suggests the critical importance of mental models, epistemology, learning how to think, and the importance of not conflating rational and true. Confronted about one of his conspiracies involving aliens, John Nash claimed that the ideas I had about supernatural beings came to me the same way that my mathematical ideas did, so I took them seriously. This is paramount. The way madness and genius enter a human mind can be identical. It is a convenient and perhaps a hangover of the Enlightenment and evidence of our erroneous commitment to autonomous rationality for us to believe that madness develops where there is a lack of thought, but this doesn't seem to be the case. If we rather accepted that mental health could be ruined by an overabundance of rationality, well, everything would become much more difficult and complex. We seemingly need rationality to have the possibility of being autonomous, and so functioning without effacement. We need to believe that problems develop from a lack of rationality. If it's possible for rationality itself to cause madness, then we must learn to handle rationality and abandon the idea that an enlightened society of fully rational people will necessarily be the best of all possible worlds. In the name of keeping this dream, we have perhaps been uneager to identify the shared cause of madness and genius, unbound rationality. We seemingly want to believe rationality cannot go too far, that there is no need for checks and balances or skepticism, that anything which unleashes rationality, akin to the effacement of givens, could turn out negatively. Desperately, we don't seem to want to consider the possibility that the world today feels crazy, precisely thanks to our efforts to make it brilliant. But don't we associate madness and genius together? Yes, but we associate the madness with the eccentricity of the genius, and furthermore tend to think that the genius goes crazy because their rationality breaks, not because their rationality is unbound. This is a technical distinction that makes all the difference. We tend to think geniuses use their brains so hard that their brains stop working, that the madness develops from a breakdown, when the exact opposite could be the case. Really, the madness results from the rationality working beyond givens and or truths, meaning the rationality doesn't break, but goes too far. The very possibility of rationality going too far doesn't even seem to be a category in our post-Enlightenment minds. We have ignored David Hume and the Scottish Enlightenment, and as a result caused unnecessary suffering with mental illness. Certainly, we need more rationality in the world today, but we cannot be certain that rationality alone will save us. Handling rationality is a much more difficult prospect than just gaining rationality, precisely because it is so hard to get people to even think in the first place, let alone think about thinking. Furthermore, all we have for learning how to handle rationality seems to be rationality, a problem that seems circular and daunting. But since rational and true are not similes, a topic explored countless times in O.G. Rose, since I cannot think it is going to rain today and rationality bring umbrella only for it not to rain, suggesting I was rational and wrong, learning to handle rationality with rationality is indeed possible, for I can handle one set of truth and corresponding rationality with a different set, X1 and X2 per se. Furthermore, there are non-rational versus irrational ways of knowing, aesthetics, experiences, emotions, and the problem of geniuses who go mad is that they seem to be out of balance with multiple ways of knowing. If all we have is rationality, Nash equilibria individually and socially seem inevitable. The fact genius and madness go together suggests that true and rationality are not similes, that the dream of autonomous rationality should die, and that rationality needs to be bound by givens, truths, and non-rational ways of knowing to keep itself from becoming self-destructive. Furthermore, the role of givens becomes clearer and seemingly necessary, which would suggest a truly just society that doesn't require restriction for belonging is impossible. The majority would go mad. A hard pill to swallow. We seem to want to be able to recognize that genius and madness correlate. We practically have no choice, the evidence so undeniable, without recognizing a causal relation. This is not to say every instance of mental illness is a result of unbound rationality, but it is to say some are, and that alone could kill our ideals and idols. As a result, to keep believing in the goodness and possibility of autonomous rationality, to avoid the difficulty the difficulty and challenge that giving up that dream would cause us, we might misinterpret the mentally ill as lacking rationality, because interpreting them correctly would require us to acknowledge the impossibility of our dream. The same fate could befall absolute knowers, delusional individuals, and Nietzschean children, all a B, as the essay Belonging Again will explore. We might sacrifice the mentally ill to our enlightenment deity, and in this way treat the mentally ill as scapegoats to avoid facing the reality that autonomous rationality isn't possible and to keep believing in its possibility. Worse yet, we might use the mentally ill as evidence we need autonomous rationality, for we define mental illness as the result of broken rationality, not an overabundance. The same might happen if we fail to diagnose the philosophical consciousness which concerned David Hume. But that must be elaborated on in The Absolute Choice. If we properly interpreted mental illness, we could better treat it. But instead we seem to make the mentally ill the subjects of a Girardian sacred violence to hold together our society. This is because our world seems organized assuming the possibility of autonomous rationality. If the mentally ill were not scapegoated and not used to affirm our world, the foundations and goals of our society would have to shift from bad philosophy to good philosophy, to allude to Hume. But scapegoating is wrong even if it is done indirectly to maintain hope in a world where givens aren't needed and yet belonging still possible for everyone. Our dreams should pay a price, not indebt the mentally ill. For more by O.G. Rose, please visit ogrose.com, Twitter, Instagram, Anchor, so on and so forth. You can find Belonging Again on Amazon. All purchases and reviews are deeply appreciated, and thank you so much for your time.